Welcome, everybody. I'll give everyone a second to trickle in, and we will get started in a second. So, thank you for coming to Rebuilding Resilient Campus Communities, Strategies for Healing and Preparing for Future Challenges. We are grateful to have so many folks join us today. The number present is perhaps a testament to the experience of working on college campuses over the past year. Whether you've been directly impacted or worried that tensions mounting on your campus may boil over, a lot has happened since classes started last fall. In our work at CDI with partner schools, we've heard the challenges that people have faced sustaining community and culture amid protests, encampments, and our ever volatile politics. We've also heard about moments of great success and deep insight into how partners hope to be ready to handle future disruptions. Our goal today is to platform some of what we've heard and contribute to a broader ongoing conversation about what college campuses can do to navigate the currents we find ourselves in. So before we get started, and even before we fully introduce ourselves, we'd like to hear what's on your mind. So if you could, in the chat, share one word or phrase that describes how you're feeling about the work that lies ahead for college campuses. One word or phrase.
Yes, it looks like chat is disabled, so feel free to put those in the Q&A, friends. Sorry about that.
Uneasy. I'll read some of them out. Uneasy, concerned, huge divide, daunting, daunted, grind, excited, hopeful, worried, challenging, hopeful, apprehensive and excited, exhausted, curious, uncertain, edgy, distrustful, scared, overwhelmed, worried, reconciliation, anxious, hopeful, under-resourced, good, tenuous, fragile, exhausting, uncertainty, daunting, uneasy, difficult, nervous, daunting, anxious, trepidation, uncertainty. I think we are approaching saturation on the number of adjectives we can describe this moment. But I hope that even just reading out this, we had overwhelmingly daunting. Even reading out this list can help you feel that you're not alone in this moment. There are others going through this, and there are a lot of people wondering about what to do next and what the next steps are. I haven't even gotten through all of these. Just to give you a sense, there are 120 quick responses to this question. So everybody's sharing, and everything I'm seeing on this list is a variation of this range of feelings, from hopeful, overwhelmed, to all these things. So there's so many different experiences right now, and you can find both folks who are ready to help pull you up if you need it, or folks that are sharing this moment and kind of moving at the same pace as you through this difficult time. So because we've got such a full plate today, I'm going to keep us moving here. So two of us are CDI facilitators. I'm going to give my colleague Mary a chance to introduce herself, and then I'll say a little bit more about myself.
Great. Welcome, everyone. We're excited that you're here. I am Mary Aviles, and my role at CDI is the Insight and Experience Lead. And so what that means is that I partner with our curriculum designers like Jake, developers, growth, and marketing to provide data-informed insights. I'm a user experience and mixed methods researcher, and I focus mostly on qualitative research. My work across multiple sectors has amplified thousands of academic, community, consumer, employee, professional, and patient voices to drive innovation and advocacy for the people within the systems that impact them. And then joining me today is Jake, who you've met, and Jake's going to tell us, he's our Director of Education, and he's going to tell us a bit about himself.
Thank you so much. Hello, everyone. My name is Jake Fay. I am the disembodied voice behind the screen today. I'm having some camera issues that aren't going to resolve themselves. I apologize for that. I am an educator at heart. I think of myself as a teacher, and I have years of experience teaching and thinking about civic discourse. Um, I have been a fellow at the University of California's National Center for Free Speech and Civic Engagement, an institutional fellow at the Edmund and Lily Safra Center for Ethics at Harvard. I have a teaching degree from the Shady Hill School in Massachusetts that I hold near and dear to my heart. And I identify as a political theorist as my disciplinary background. And I come to this work thinking about the challenges of civic discourse from that lens, as well as from my experience as a teacher at multiple levels of our educational institutions. Joining us today are a number of wonderful and super exciting panelists. I'm stuttering over words because I get to spend time talking to them and a lot. And what they will bring today is just a great stuff. And I hope that it will help lift us all up and think about this moment in different terms. So Mary, I'll let you introduce them.
Excellent. Thank you, Jake. And I should say, for anyone who asks in the chat, we are recording. We will be sending you all a link to the recording within the next day or so. We will also post the recording on our website in our resource library. And never fear, a replay will be available. And for those who've mentioned about Jake's sound, we recognize that poor Jake is in a hotel with spotty Wi-Fi, and so we're just doing the best we can with his video and audio today. But on to our panelists. First, we have Sarah Stroup, who is a professor of political science at Middlebury College and director of the Catherine Wasserman Davis Collaborative in Conflict Transformation. Her research explores international NGOs, humanitarian relief, and human rights and democracy. She is author of Borders Among Activists and co-author of The Authority Trap. And she is trained in dialogue facilitation. She trained in dialogue facilitation with Essential Partners and has done basic mediation and restorative practice training. Virtually next to Sarah is Melissa Jones, who currently serves as the Associate Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students at the University of Mary Washington. During her 25 years in student affairs leadership in higher ed, she has held positions across the state of Virginia in residence life, student conduct, orientation, and student activities and involvement. In her current role, she oversees UMW's interdisciplinary behavioral intervention team, new student programs, transfer success, leadership development, student activities, and advises the UMW Student Government Association. She finds the collegiate experience to be one of the most transformative that a person can have and enjoys watching students realize the power they possess to make changes in the world around them. And finally, we have Bobby Darival, who is a seasoned leader with over 10 years of experience in public and private sectors. As executive director of the MPA program at the Colin Powell School and chief administrative officer, he oversees public service academic programs, staff development, and operational management, driving positive social change through education and leadership development. So now that we've met everyone, let's review today's agenda.
Here's how today will go. I'm hoping I'm actually going to switch to a different set of microphone, and hopefully that changes the sound. So we are going to give each of our three speakers a chance to share what's been going on at each of their campuses. Each presentation will be followed by a short time for a question or two. We will also have time after all three presenters have shared to ask bigger picture questions that draw out themes from across their presentations. But there's lots to do. So let's get started with our first presenter, Sarah from Middlebury. We'll then go to Melissa and then Bobby, then the Q&A, and then we'll wrap up. So Sarah, take it away.
Thanks very much. Thank you, Mary and Jake, for the invitation to be here on this wonderful panel. And thanks to each of you for making time for this conversation. So Middlebury has some experience with some divisive events on our campus. I'm here to share that case study, to talk about our path through, and to suggest some strategies that we have found helpful. For reference, Middlebury College is a private liberal arts college with 2,500 undergrads in rural Vermont. 10% of our student body is international. About 2/3 of our students are white. We have historical commitments to language education and environmental stewardship, and that profile means that we have a lot of globally engaged and activist-oriented students. I'll also say, in terms of this political moment, that we are also in a traditionally blue state with support for higher education, which gives us some space to do the work that we're trying to foreground. So I'll start Middlebury's story, and Jake, I'll ask you to go to our next slide. I'll start Middlebury's story around another election year in 2016 and 2017. At Middlebury, 5 weeks after Trump was inaugurated, we had a controversial speaker come to our small town in Vermont. Charles Murray's planned talk was shut down, and Middlebury made every major newspaper in America. Our campus became intensely polarized between a free speech camp and an inclusion camp. Our initial reaction, and this probably won't surprise folks in higher education, is that we made a committee as we came out of this, the Committee on Speech and Inclusion. I was on that committee. There were 12 of us, and we did some good work. We had some public dialogue events. We hosted a lunch series on classroom climate. We did some student surveys. And then based on that work, we applied for a grant to expand dialogic practices in and out of the classroom. And that was the Engaged Listening Project. The heart of the ELP was a semester-long, cohort-based professional development program. We have about 300 teaching faculty during any year, and over the 3 years of the grant, we were able to train 60 faculty, which is about 20% of our teaching faculty. Since then, the Engaged Listening Project has been folded into a larger conflict transformation collaborative. And when it's not my turn, I'll put some links in the chat to share those resources if you're interested. In the larger conflict transformation umbrella, we foreground structured dialogue, mediation, restorative practices, critical self-awareness, and more. To do the work of constructive conflict, our first critical learning goal is to move from a view of conflict as always negative, that has to be avoided, to seeing conflict either neutrally as part of the human experience, or to understanding that conflict has positive aspects, that it leads to deeper relationships and transformative social change. So we started this conflict transformation collaborative. It's a big effort, and almost immediately a couple of students came to me and said, if you are really going to do conflict transformation at Middlebury, you have to tackle the hardest things, including how we talk about Israel and Palestine. As may have happened on your campuses, in May of 2021, we had some fraught incidents when there was also fighting in Gaza. And so our impression was that people were either scarred by that experience or scared to engage. I worked with a colleague who's also trained in structured dialogue, and we convened several dinners in the spring of 2023 with the people most affected by this issue. I want to be very clear. We did not solve anything. We were just getting started, but we engaged in robust communication. We tried to build trust, and that was invaluable after October 7th. Building on those initial efforts, working in relationship, we expanded those dialogue efforts to campus-wide engagement, both publicly and privately. Some student groups came to us and asked for support for conversations that were too sensitive to happen in the public sphere. I also want to name at this moment, but that many of our students, they hate dialogue. They don't want to talk, they want to act. They hear conflict transformation or they hear the word dialogue and they think that it means demobilization. And I want to say that they're right sometimes. It does, right? Sometimes people call for those things and that is what they want. They want less conflict, right? They want people to move away from using their voice. But we heard this critique from our students and we tried to welcome it. So in the spring of 2024, when students began an encampment on our central lawn, we tried to speak with them to welcome their engagement. Our students are tackling the world's most difficult problems. They are using their voice. That is welcome for our young people. The challenge for this work is that conflict transformation doesn't mean less conflict. It means inviting better conflict. We were fortunate that our president has been a leader in this conflict transformation work and that our senior leadership worked to embody these principles as well. We were able in the spring of 2024 to negotiate an end to our encampment that allowed for graduation to happen on the same space and that yielded a shared statement of educational purpose. We're still not done. Those conversations have continued. But while we were dealing with conversations around Israel and Palestine last year, we were also getting ready for the election. We worked to create settings for constructive conversations about politics, and we gave it the simplest name we could come up with it. We called it Good Talks. Come and have a good talk about a political issue. These are spaces where people came together to get an introduction from a faculty expert of 10 or 15 minutes, and then join structured small group conversations. We had a post-election event in town with our local theater last Tuesday that had 70 folks in attendance, hungry for some space for reflection. Thinking about this work that we have been doing, we have had a lot of trials at Middlebury, and I will also say that we have had a lot of advantages. Those include buy-in from our senior leadership and resources and grants from outside. We're only in the third year of our conflict transformation work, and I'd be happy to talk about specific programs and strategies. But my core message in my remaining minutes is that I think our biggest achievement has been a slow shift in mindset that has been organized around some guiding principles. If you're interested in conflict transformation as an organizing framework for campus conflicts, CDI has a report, I believe, from April 2023 about conflict transformation on college campuses, and it's really, really helpful. But Jake, if you wouldn't mind moving to the next slide, I'll share some of those guiding principles. So the first thing that we've taken away from this work is that you cannot wait for the hottest moments to talk about the hardest things. We have experienced deep division, division where people were crossing the street to avoid talking to one another, scars that I think remain to this day from some of the really intense episodes on our campus. But from that division, we have seen the need to invest in preparation and in scaffolding. The election is a divisive moment, but we know that more divisive moments are coming. So how can we engage proactively with campus hotspots? Second, one of our guiding principles is that conflict cannot be avoided. And in fact, conflict is part of education. Our job is to bring students ideas and information that challenges their priors. If we show up to those conflicts trying to defend our institutions and their reputations, we are modeling an aversion to conflict. We need to show up as educators. That means a fierce commitment to our students and also a recognition that they make mistakes, that we are all capable of growth. The third guiding principle that has helped us, and this definitely comes from some of our restorative work, is to meet people where they are and ask them what they need. There's a lot of good research showing that shame and contempt don't change people's minds. So if folks aren't showing up for your events, which has happened to me many times, the challenge is to go find them and ask them, why aren't you coming? What do you need? Is this actually what you need, or do you need something else? I think that if we want our students to take risks, we have to be willing to do the same. Finally, we have been working in networks of collaboration. It is often the case that we want to control the emergence of these programs because these issues are so hot. And yet to do this work at scale, we have to work with people across the wide range of our institution. So I'm here as part of Middlebury, but there are dozens of faculty and staff who have been through various versions of these fires and decided to work in relationship. The story that they would tell you about what has happened at Middlebury would necessarily be different, maybe wildly different from the story that I've brought to you today. That has to be okay if we're working in relationship, right? To collaborate where we can to support our students as they work through these difficult issues. Thanks so much for a little bit of your time. I look forward to the conversation.
All right, so the Q&A is open, and we would love for you to share your question. Oh, very good, from Erin. regarding conversations Israel and Palestine. To what extent was or have the chaplains and religious life staff at Middlebury been involved in the structured dialogue work? Or were they pushed out in favor of more secular voices, strategies, etc.? I found that many schools and their administrators have either pushed out religious life staff leaders completely in order to not make anyone comfortable, or to put the entire burden of these conversations and work with the most affected on religious life staff leaders.
It's a great question. As I imagine is happening for many of you, there are debates over whether this is a religious issue, right? And so what should be the role of various staff members and offices at the college? At Middlebury, we definitely collaborated with our Scott Center for Religious Life. And a lot of it has to do with personalities and capacities. So our Dean of Spiritual and Religious Life was trained in sustained dialogue at UVA before coming to Middlebury. Our college rabbi trained with Essential Partners in reflective structured dialogue. And so not only did their practice in interfaith dialogue inform the work that we were doing, but also their capacity in training in helping people talk across different values was really important as we tried to create a place where wide-ranging but respectful conversation was possible.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. I've got one person did ask us if the Engaged Listening project was published.
Yes, there's a separate website, and I'll drop the link in the chat.
That's great. And Sarah, you can share it with me too, and I'll make sure to include anything that we reference here today will be included in the follow-up email for all of you. How do you build safe spaces where students feel like sharing their concerns?
Some of you all may have seen this research from, I think it's College Pulse and Fire, showing that the #1 impediment to student engagement is not what faculty are doing at the front of the room, it's the fear of social sanction. We have found that at our own institution as well. We don't want to force anyone to be vulnerable, right? But create the conditions under which people might be more willing to open up. And so doing this carefully, making sure that this is voluntary. And I will also say the sustained nature of engagements can be really important. So the classroom is a wonderful space to do this because you have the scaffolding of an entire semester where you can slowly build towards that greater level of vulnerability. But some people are not in a place where they are ready to be vulnerable, and perhaps to be asked to speak on something might do more harm for them. And so I think giving people the agency to decide when and how they engage can be frustrating when we're trying to invite people to really speak out on pressing issues, but honoring where they are in that conversation, I think, is also part of the work.
Excellent. All right, we will go back to some of the questions for Sarah once we get to the end. And now to keep on track, we're going to move on to hear from Melissa from University of Mary Washington. Melissa Jones, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for having me here. As indicated, I am Melissa Jones. I use she, her pronouns, and I am the Associate Vice President of Student Affairs and Dean of Students at the University of Mary Washington. I like to give a little context before I get started. Context is one of my top strengths. And so I like to make sure that folks know a little bit about the institution that we're talking about and what our history is. And so if we can move to the next slide, I'll do just that. So Mary Washington is a public institution in the state of Virginia. It's located in Fredericksburg, Virginia, which is about an hour south of DC and an hour north of Richmond. So we are smack in the middle of our two capitals. And again, we are a public institution here in the great Commonwealth of Virginia. And if you know anything about higher education in Virginia, you know that we've got several wonderful institutions that are public here. And so that I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but it really shapes how we approach some of our things. We are a liberal arts institution. And so my time here, I have been here through 3 presidential elections. I've been here for about 10.5 years. And so I've seen 3 presidential elections play out and 3 cycles of this. And so I think it's an important piece for me to remember as I approach my work that I was here in 2016 and then in 2020 and in 2024. And so the tenor in 2016, after that election, it was very, very quiet on campus. It was a bit somber, and there was a sense of paralysis at that time. And it really stayed that way through January, when many of our students, because we were so close to DC, many of them mobilized and went to the marches that were up there. In 2020, that mood was a little all over the place because we were in the middle of a pandemic and folks weren't really sure what that was going to look like. And then of course, January 6th happened. And that was very close to us. And so that impacted our students in ways that other institutions may not have seen, because it really was not far from us. Many of our students are from Northern Virginia. And so that it has an emotional impact. And now we're here in 2024, and the emotions are a little bit higher. It's important to remember, for me, certainly, that our students often are traditional aged. And so this is many of them, the first presidential election that they have voted in, the first election that they have voted in. And so the emotions are higher. The highs are high for some students and the lows are low for others. And so that's really what we've seen on our campus. We are also a highly civically engaged campus. In 2017, our students got together and petitioned for a day of class cancellation to be able to encourage participation on election day. And so they pressed for that and pressed with the faculty. And then the academic year 2018-2019, the faculty ratified a day on democracy. And so it is not a day off, it is a day on for our students. And so we also have leaned into the fact that our students are civically engaged. In 2020 and 2022, we achieved gold status at the All-In Campus Democracy Challenge. And so our students really want to lean into encouraging other students to participate in the process. And they try to do that in a nonpartisan way, in as much as they can, for sure. And they get students to the polls. And so our university codified that approach, and that was important to us in the strategic plan in 2022. And so we've got a lot of top-down support for that type of engagement. So that's incredibly exciting. I also want to make sure that folks do know that we did see an encampment at the end of the spring semester in May of 2024. Our Students for Justice in Palestine had an encampment. And while that was not something that and again, we're a public institution, one of the things that we saw is we were the first institution in the Commonwealth of Virginia to have that first public institution. And then that started to coalesce on Virginia Tech's campus and Virginia Commonwealth's campus and UVA's campus, and almost all of those ended in arrest. And so while it's not something that we love to say that's a thing that we navigated, we did. And we were the first one to have that in that week. That was so fraught in May. And so that colors some things, and it colors what we have learned. And so if we can move to the next slide, that would be great. And so one of the things I want to put out there for you all is, what's our approach been since as the election started to move upon us? Honestly, initially here on campus, one of the things that we saw is there was initial paralysis, because we had really been preparing our students for the fact that we may not have an immediate decision. Most of our students were not alive in 2000 when that election played itself out, and it took a little while for us to figure out what was happening. And so there was an initial paralysis. It was pretty quiet on campus on that day. We had a lot of students email and say, I don't feel like I can come to class on that day. Our faculty, I think, were pretty compassionate about some of those pieces for our students. And so it was pretty quiet here on campus. What then started to coalesce was a lot of small conversations and listening sessions. Now, prior to the election, one of the things that we had done was looked at our programming for the following 6 weeks to say what's happening here on campus. Where can we direct our students? We sent that out pre-election, particularly in the vein of being nonpartisan. We don't know what the next several weeks are going to bring, but we know that it's already a stressful time. And so here's some of the programming that you can find on campus. But the day after the election, there were lots of small conversations, lots of listening sessions as people were processing through their emotions, whether that was a high, whether that was a low. We also made sure that we have created more walk-in hours of the Dean of Students office, but also our counseling center, just to make sure that students knew that that was available to them. We advertised it before the election, we advertised it after the election as well. And then we increased our programming generally because one of the things that we wanted to make sure everyone understood is that this election particularly was happening in the context of the academic semester. And so course registration didn't stop because the election happened. And so our students were already experiencing a high level of stress. And it was important for us to center that as a caring and compassionate community, as well as any of the stress that may come with the outcome of the election. And so we did have some movie nights. We did have our fall formal. We had a paint night, and we did work with folks through their student account and their financial aid. And then we also had conversations about what's going to happen next. We had some creation of reflective spaces. There were some local politicians who came to meet with our students immediately following, who have partnered with some of our student organizations and have amplified some of the issues that they are hearing from students and their constituents as well. And so we've created a comfortable enough space for those things to happen. And again, that recognition of the academic timeline, again, midterms and finals are almost upon us. But one of the things that we've also really tried to be very thoughtful of is, particularly after any presidential election, we always have a cadre of students who don't necessarily feel comfortable going home. And so one of the things that is great for Mary Washington is that we allow students to stay in residence. If they are a residential student, we do allow them to stay in residence over the holiday breaks. And we have our dining services that we work with to make sure that those students are not food insecure, as well as with our pantry on campus. And so we try to make sure that we are being thoughtful about them. And we also have a 24/7 counseling, online counseling software that we can engage students with should they need support, no matter where they are. And so those are some of the things that we've done. But I think one of the things that I'd like to highlight is, as important as what we've done is how we've done it. Sarah actually had talked about the importance of that relationship. And one of the things that Mary Washington is really a hallmark of Mary Washington is that we are a relational campus. And so we stayed in relationship with our students, and we stayed in relationship with each other through all of that, whether that's through the encampment and as we debrief how we could have done that better, we stayed in relationship with each other. Post-election, as staff members, we created space just for us to talk through, what does this mean for our campus? How can we better support our students? And when I say we stayed in relationship, that those relationships are interdisciplinary. So we have some standing meetings on our calendars right now that involve housing and admissions, academic services, new student programs, multicultural center, community engagement, student activities. There are folks from those areas that meet weekly or bi-weekly so that we are always in communication, and they are standing meetings. And I have found them to be incredibly important on our campus, because you don't know what you don't know. And not and I'm not in touch with every student here. And so other staff members, other faculty members, other students can see things that I can't. And it's important to be able to amplify those voices, those emotions, and be able to hold space for them. So I'm going to ask for the next slide, just very quickly. Because what I do want to amplify is that we are a public institution, and that does change things a little bit. Our stakeholders are a little bit different in that they're students, parents, faculty, staff, administrators. The Board of Visitors is appointed by the governor, and taxpayers are part of our constituents, and we do need to be thoughtful about that. And so part of what that does is it situates the public institution in the context of the community. And so it is certainly something that we as administrators have to think about and consider, that we are operating in a climate that has a complexity that we have to think about. Virginia is a purple state, and so that it can change with the wind. It kind of just depends on where the administration, the state administration is at that time. And so that is something that we as administrators do have to be thoughtful about as we navigate some things. It's a piece that we have taken some moments to educate our student leadership about as well. What does that happen? How do boards of visitors how are they appointed? Who gets to do that? How long are their terms? And so it helps us as we are shaping the next the future leaders here. We have seen an increase in responsive programming already. We have had a lot of student groups come to us and want to create space for their group, but also for their fellow students, which is great. We have already had our pro-life group on campus come and say we want to have some dialogue, and they have done that, and there was some back and forth, and it was passionate but very respectful. So we have that as a value, and so we try to make sure that we are continuing to be very and having our students be very respectful. Our Planned Parenthood group has already come and said we'd like to have a space to talk about what birth control might look like in the coming months. Are there things that folks need to be thinking about? And that was a direct reflection of what some of our students have asked for. And so our role is to help them to make that happen. So we have sent out and reminded everyone, how do you plan an event? And what are the time, place, and manner restrictions? And how can we help you to be successful? In addition, we have amplified resources for students, faculty, and staff. Our employee assistance program is a really important piece that we felt like we needed to make sure that we sent out and reminded our faculty and staff that there were resources that were there for them as well. Our campuses are full of people. And so it's important for us to remember that everyone is navigating something different. And sometimes showing up and being the strongest person in the room is not something that everyone can do every single day, and that's okay. And we just need to be in community with one another so that we can take care of one another. And again, we have a software, we have Timely Care here on our campus. And so reminding our students that's there for them even over breaks. And just reminding everyone here who we are in conversation and community with, that sometimes how you do something is as important as what you do. And so take the time to find out where someone is, where are they on their journey, what is overwhelming to them at that moment. And so sometimes you just kind of have to slow it down. And so we've been trying to be future facing and cautious about any toxic positivity, particularly right out of the gate. There was a lot of conversation about it. Things are going to be okay. Things are going to be giving space for a student to be able to breathe and say, I don't feel okay. That's such an incredibly important thing, because for some students, their anxiety is real and that their worry is real. And so it may be that I, as Dean of Students, cannot make that okay for them. But holding space for it to not be okay is so incredibly important. And so we've tried to have that conversation over and over with our staff and our faculty and our other students as well. And I have to tell you, one of the things that is so great here in Virginia is that there are weekly statewide meetings of Chief Student Affairs Officers. Fridays at 11 is when the Chief Student Affairs Officer all get together. And it's really not just the Chief Student Affairs Officers, it's anybody in the senior level student affairs. So the Dean of Students, the Vice President of Student Affairs. This is a thing that started in COVID and it started in 2020 and it's just been going since. I cannot tell you how incredibly important that has been. And if you don't have something like that happening in your state, then all it really takes is someone to put it together. The Vice President of Student Affairs at James Madison University just pulled everybody together and it's kept going. And what that allows us to do is to really pulse check our campus to other people. We share best practices. It's so incredibly important. And so I can't say enough about how important that is, I think, for the future of kind of where we're going. And so it doesn't have to be Chief Student Affairs Officers, whatever your role is. If you can get people together and have a conversation, do it all day long, please.
Wonderful. Melissa, thank you so much for sharing that. I've got a bunch of questions for you. I'm going to give you one so that we can get to Bobby, and then we'll try to circle back to those at the end. One of the things that a question for you is, and I know that we're like, sort of a week out of some of these things, but how do you think about measuring the impact of these programs and the supports that you put in place? And like, what are some of the biggest learnings you have encountered on that, sort of in that measurement bucket?
I think right now, the initial, I'll be honest, the initial measurement was probably where is the anxiety and how much we had students like right out of the gate who said, I can't go to class. I can't engage with anything. And so some of the measures for those are you engaged? Are you plugged back into your class and into your coursework right now? And so for us, some of the initial pieces are that I think as we move further away from the, again, we're kind of just in week 2 and moving from grief, paralysis, whatever, wherever folks were, into some action steps. And so I think as we move further away, we'll start to be able to have a little bit more of a tangible, what kind of programming, how many people, that type of thing, what are the action steps? And I think right now we're just kind of coalescing. So right now, a measure of success for us is that our students are out and talking to each other again. Because we had so many who were emailing faculty saying, I can't get out of bed. And so as we move further away, I think I know those metrics will change into, can we still lean into our own values as an institution, our respectability, our being able to have inclusive dialogue with one another and still have achieve student success.
Thank you so much, Melissa. All right, let's move on to Bobby so we can hear what Bobby has to say. Jake, if you can move us forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. So happy and fortunate to be part of this conversation and to be in community with you all today. As has been mentioned, my name is Bobby Derival, so I'm the Chief Administrative Officer at the Panelists School. I also wear the hat of being the MPA Program Director. That's for the graduate program in public administration at the Panelists School. And I'm going to talk a little bit about my world and my space. And I thought I'd kind of start by giving folks a little bit of context of where I work, what kind of school system I'm in. So as you can see on your screen, the top logo, CUNY, the City University of New York. The City University of New York is the nation's largest urban public university, and it is a transformative and has been a transformative engine of social mobility that is really integral and a critical component of the lifeblood of New York City. CUNY today has 25 colleges spread across the New York City's 5 boroughs. serving more than 230,000 degree-seeking students of all ages and awarding 50,000 degrees each year. So a truly like a behemoth of a school system, really, really massive. Let's go down a level. The City College of New York was the first CUNY campus. It was founded in 1847 as a nation's first free public institution of higher education. And currently at CCNY, more than 16,000 students pursue undergraduate and graduate degrees in 8 schools and divisions. And we are based in a very historic community, the Harlem community, West Harlem specifically. Something about City College is, we really ascribe to the values of providing high quality education to the folks who typically have been on the margins. It's something that's integral to who we are as an institution, and we believe in lifting up the whole person. Going down one more level, the Colin Powell School for Civic and Global Leadership, and I'll ask if we can move to the next slide, please. So the Colin Powell School of Civic and Global Leadership is my home. It is where I'm the Chief Administrative Officer and Executive Director of the MPA program. The Colin Powell School is committed to developing leaders for social change, established in 2013. Our school, the Powell School, is the home of the social sciences and leadership development programs at City College. There's about 4,000 students that we serve in undergraduate and graduate programming. Our mission is outlined there at the bottom of the screen: lifting leaders, shifting power, transforming society. Our goal is to transform, one of the nation's most diverse student bodies into tomorrow's global leaders. And you can see just some quick the structure of our institution. Today, about half of our students are immigrants. Most of our students come from lower income backgrounds. More than 60% of our students are actually first generation college students, and 85% of our students are people of color. So this kind of gives you, a little bit of flavor for who is our student population. And before we move on to the next slide, what I wanted to highlight for this conversation to kind of, drive home the context, similar to what Melissa and Sarah spoke about, one of our seminal catalytic events last spring was an encampment, a protest that happened on our campus, an encampment that ensued that really was kind of the tip of the spear for the CUNY protest movement, and the subsequent fracture of our community in terms of how we dealt with this encampment as an institution. Just to put it plainly and name it, we did call the NYPD, the institution called the police to break down the encampment once there was a break-in happening on campus. And so that fractured our community at every level, from students and their experiences to faculty and staff to the administrative leaders of our institution. Things have not been the same since. And then fast forward to today, on the heels of a really, consequential election, much of the state of our campus persists in this kind of, unique space where we're trying to navigate what do we do next. Next slide, please. So I wanted to share super briefly, because I wanted to get to what sound and reads like a really awesome questions from the group. So I wanted to maybe share briefly, looking back, some of my observations over the last year, and thinking and reflecting specifically about the post-election, post-election. And there's 3 real key words that kind of jump out at me as reflections and observations that I wanted to share. One was as an institution, and these are my own observations and my own thinking, but I tried to put some language to it, as we all continue to try to put language to make meaning out of our experiences. I felt, many of my colleagues and most of the folks I spoke to felt unprepared for the particular moment. And that looked like, just in terms of preparation, in terms of what do I do if XYZ happens, all the way down to like the nitty-gritty of skills, like not feeling equipped personally to have certain difficult conversations or to broach a subject with someone who has a position that's diametrically opposed to my own, or to navigate what looks like conflict, intergroup conflict on campuses. So an observation feeling unprepared for the moment. A second observation around anxiety, and specifically anxiety around how I show up. Where do I fit in this equation, right? That's something that I've struggled with even in my own roles, in how I talk to my own students, my public service students who are professionals in public service and who expect quite a bit from their MPA program director. I struggle to find how I fit. And so I think of it from the staff perspective. How do we fit, given when our institution does things that perhaps we may not agree with? And then that kind of boils down to a trust deficit that I've observed as kind of one of the biggest manifestations of this fracturing within our community, is just a lack of trust in between groups and between folks, in terms of, you know, what happens next, and how will the institution respond? How will my colleague respond? How will the students in my class respond? And they're feeling a deficit of trust and not being able to know kind of what is going to be someone's next move, so to speak. Will they escalate this, or are they going to work with me? And so those are observations that, as I reflect and look back, still feel true to me today. And the picture at the bottom is actually a staff retreat that we held at the start of this semester. We gathered all Colin Powell School staff to kind of put these questions at our forefront. Next slide, please. And so I kind of want to shift into kind of a look forward and thinking about what kind of strategies then, given the prompts and the questions and reflections that we all probably hold and many of us share, what are kind of strategies that will help guide us towards the future? And here are three kind of strategic areas that we're thinking about at the Colin Powell School. One is, the first is to dare to dialogue. And the genealogy of this term comes from the part one conversation that CDI put together, a webinar. One of the panelists used this term as for their program, Dare to Dialogue. And I loved it so much because it's what we're trying to do, right? We're trying to dare to dialogue and set dialogue as a priority and put it at the forefront in staff meetings, in retreats, in focus groups, in surveys, in anywhere where you can hold a conversation, where you can try to be heard and seen, and also see and hear other folks. We're trying to lean in as much as possible with flexing and building a muscle around dialogue as a community. And then there's kind of the other side of that, which is when not to dialogue, because as has been mentioned by both Melissa and Sarah, when folks are fearful, or in a state of heightened anxiety, dialogue may not be the answer. And we are very clear saying dialogue is not the only answer. And in some situations, it is absolutely not the answer. And being clear about that, and being aware enough to know, is there another answer? Like, okay, there's a strict policy guideline here that we all need to be aware about. That's not about dialogue. It's just actually about following a policy or set of protocols that are meant to keep us all safe, right? And to promote safety on our campus. Or it can look like just building community and being with people and being in shared spaces with others without the intention of having like that conversation that you've been wanting to have. We've learned that dialogue is not always the answer. Make it concrete as another kind of strategic focus that we have, which is all about just whatever we're thinking and conversing and talking about, trying to bring those applications into the real world. How do you make it concrete? What does it look like in real life is the question that I always ask the folks that I'm around. For us, that's meant leaning on tools, right? CDI has a program, an online blended learning program called Perspectives, that we as an institution have rolled out to our students and to our faculty and to our staff, to varying levels of success. But the point is we're doing it, right? We're trying to make it real and concrete and something tangible for folks. So if we say we need to up our skills in dialogue, what does that look like? Well, that actually could look like a couple of things, and this is an example. And then, of course, just making space for the conversations in whatever form that they may show up. Pre-election, I did a tabletop exercise where we talked and we did simulation and scenario planning, and that came straight from the election guidebook from CDI. So shouting the praises of CDI. But it's use the tools at your disposal and deploy them so that they're concrete and tactile and folks can kind of touch and feel and live with them. They help to catalyze conversations. And then kind of a third strategic area that I think about is seek out collaborations. And I put collaborations, not collaborators. You can always find collaborators, always folks who are willing to go and brainstorm an idea with you and take it to the next level. But what's really hard is to get an idea, bring it into the real world, execute on it, and start measuring and seeing like, hey, did that work? Did we run a test that will tell us something? And so the focus on the actual product, right? The collaboration itself, the actual end. And so I wanted to maybe just highlight two examples. One is the Psychological Center is a clinic on our campus within the Colin Powell School that is a psychological clinic that serves the community, our community in Harlem. It's been repurposed in unique ways because the community, the CCNY community needs it. And so now we're having conversations with the executive director of the clinic on how are they supporting staff training, inviting them to meetings that we hold at the staff level, expanding their hours and making it more accessible to students and staff and faculty members, and allowing our psychological center, which is again a community-facing endeavor, to become a leader on campus and help lead us and shed light on the things that we may not know around folks' mental state, their emotional state, and what kind of services and resources that they need. And the other collaboration that I wanted to highlight, particularly post-election, and thinking about the many, many students on our campus that have precarious statuses, immigration statuses explicitly, who are quite fearful and don't know what this means. And many of us who are staff or the faculty also don't know how to guide them. So we've actually started the planning of developing a task force just to share information, right? Just to collect information that's out there and to share it and to kind of help scrub disinformation or misinformation within our own community before we can put something out to students. And so trying to do the diligence and the internal work on our side, inside the house, to make sure that we are presenting our students with actual viable resources and good information that they can make informed decisions on. I think I spoke pretty fast, but I was hoping to get through just in time to hold space for questions. And so thank you all for this opportunity, and I will kick it back to Jake or Mary.
Thanks, Bobby. I just want to give you time, a minute or two, to answer just one question. You talked about student groups. One person asked, how do you incorporate students? Could you give an example of how you incorporate students in the work? And then when you're done answering that question, we'll flash up a slide with our sort of wrap up info, and we'll call it a day.
Sure, absolutely. So I'll give two ways where we've tried to engage students. One is through their education and not forgetting that we are an academic institution that is here to learn and try to create and cultivate a learning environment for folks. And in that learning environment, having as many diverse perspectives as possible to be able to show up, whether it's in the classroom or outside the classroom. And so the perspectives module from CDI, it's actually being rolled out in the classroom. And so, for example, the psychology department has decided to make this part of their 101 psych class. And so it's 700 students in intro psych who all must do the perspectives module to give them some foundation around constructive dialogue and what those skills require. That's something that's somewhat compulsory, but engages kind of the act of learning with our students. The other piece is trying to find the spaces where you can engage students who are in student groups and who are looking for more skills so that they can navigate their own institution. Like if they want to, let's say, go ahead and advocate for a protest and file a permit for a protest, or if they want to advocate for use of a shared space, we make the pitch that some dialogue skills would help you. And so we try to offer those trainings to folks who need them, right? Who can see that as a value add and as a benefit. So not something compulsory, but something that would be voluntary. We say, actually, I need that skill. Thank you for offering it. And from my perspective, you do with it what you will. The point is that I'm exposing you. And so that's two specific ways where we've tried to engage students.
Amazing. Thank you, Bobby. And Jake, if you just want to take us to the last slide. Most importantly, thank you to our panelists for making time both to attend here and speak with everyone today and share their expertise, as well as in their time preparing with us in the previous months, and for the work that you all do. If anyone on the call would like to follow up, you can reach out to growth@constructivedialogue.org if you heard about something you'd like to follow up with, a CDI resource. If you haven't downloaded our election dialogue playbook, I've included the link here. Despite it contains dialogue activities that are useful in talking about the election even now in this post-election time frame. If you would like to host a responding to campus crisis session on with your cohort, please, there's an email or a URL there to reach out and talk to us about that. And of course, the most popular question, yes, we will post a webinar recording online, and we will follow up via email to everyone who registered with both a link to the email as well as post it to our website and any of the resources that our wonderful panelists shared here today. So thank you from me. Jake, would you like to do a sign off from you?
Sure. I apologize that we didn't have as much time for questions at the end, but I think that it was time well spent listening and hearing from our panelists. So thanks again to them. And we look forward to hearing from many of you in the audience in the future. Please reach out to us or to our panelists with more questions or ways that we can help support you in this moment.